Hey there, everyone. We are back with more comics I read this week. So it's actually been 2 weeks, but whatever. Comics I read recently. How about that? Let's get into these, though. We got 4 books here. First book, Snagglepuss Chronicles. Now, you might be thinking, what the hell is Snagglepuss Chronicles, and why are you reading it? So this is called the full name, Exit Stage Left, the Snagglepuss Chronicles. Now this is the kind of, DC has a Hanna-Barbera universe where they have like all these Hanna-Barbera comics that they're doing, right? And they're all like not like Hanna-Barbera, except for maybe Future Quest. But like Future Quest I read, right? And I figured I'd look into what the other ones were like because I liked Future Quest. And Snagglepuss here, let me explain this to you. In this comics, now it's like an origin story for Snagglepuss, the cartoon character, but he's like a real life character, like a person who becomes a cartoon character at the end. But like, he's initially like a gay playwright during the Red Scare period, like the kind of McCarthy era Red Scare, like, televised trials to root out communists in Hollywood or whatever. And you've got your Snagglepuss here, and he's like caught up in that, and there's a bunch of drama going on in his life. There's like a lot of crossover stuff here. So there's other characters who show up too. So like if like just flipping through this, let me see. So like he has like a sham marriage with another person, right? And he's got like here in the beginning he's talking to, you can see the little dog there is Augie Doggy, who is another Hanna-Barbera character. You see some of like the Banana Splits characters are in here. The hippo whose name I forget. I don't remember any of the Banana Splits characters' names. But here's a horse who is a cop. If you can figure out, he's like, it's kind of you get a reveal later on who he is actually, but if you know about Hanna-Barbera, you kind of figure out like, hey, there's a famous horse character. Who is it? But I won't spoil it for you in case you haven't put that together. But you also got like a blue dog. Who could that be? It's Huckleberry Hound. Huckleberry Hound Senior, who is also like a gay something writer. But like, basically the story is about how they blacklist Snagglepuss. Like he gets called in to the kind of hearings about communism, and he just like kind of makes a fool of them. And from there, like they try to set him up. So like they set up a raid on the bar that he goes to. It's the Stonewall. If anybody knows anything about history, you'll know what the Stonewall is significant for. But they're there and they raid the bar, but Snagglepuss is gone, not there that day, but Huckleberry Hound is there, and they arrest him, and his horsey gay lover here betrays him and arrests him, calls him something horrible. But, and then, like, they go through, Huckleberry Hound is, like, basically blacklisted and humiliated, and he can't go out in public, and he's like constantly getting death threats and stuff, and kills himself. But his son comes, and Huckleberry Hound Jr., and they become like, they're blacklisted, and they get the horse, who is a character I'm not going to spoil, but I'm sure you got it already, shows up and invites him to join this cartoon thing. They're like, they don't care about you can do these cartoons, nobody cares. So they join up, and they all become cartoons, and Huckleberry Hound Jr. gets a job as Huckleberry Hound, and the horse gets his job as the horse. And Snagglepuss becomes Snaggletooth, and then eventually Snagglepuss. But yeah, so it's like the Snagglepuss book I never knew I wanted, but it was good enough. It was really good. Like, it was an easy read, quick getting through, and like, it was kind of like a nice little look into that 1950s period where, like, the Red Scare period. It's actually sourced in the back. Like, there's like a bunch of here's like historical glossary that tells you all the significance of the things that happen in the comic for people who aren't big on history. So it's actually really interesting because it's like a nice little slice of history, but also, you have this, obviously gay Snagglepuss being Snagglepuss. It's great. Good book. I would recommend it. Definitely pick that up. So actually, I'm going to probably look into getting a few more of these Hanna-Barbera universe comics. There's one, like the Rough and Ready show, and I've never seen that before. I've never even heard of that before, but it's written by Howard Chaykin, and I really like him, so I'll probably pick that up at some point. But there's other ones too, like Wacky Raceland, which is like a post-apocalyptic kind of Death Race 2000 kind of thing with wacky races. Sounds awesome. So that sounds like a really good overall kind of digging these Hanna-Barbera universe things. It makes me want to get the Looney Tunes DC crossover stuff. But yeah, so next book here, we've got a Marvel book, which is rare. It's a relatively new one. This is the Immortal Hulk. Now, this is like the original Bruce Banner Hulk. And this is really good. Like, I've heard a bunch of people talking about the Hulk recently. Like, oh yeah, the Immortal Hulk is good. No, he's not like the Amadeus Cho Hulk, the Gogurt Hulk as he's known. This is the Bruce Banner Hulk, but also they've taken it into this kind of really dark place where it's like a horror comic starring the Hulk, which is really good. Because the Hulk plays really well as a horror character. He kind of is based on a horror character, right? I mean, it's not like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is kind of a horror base for the Hulk. And the Hulk is basically a monster. It's a monster comic. That's what it's all like started as, and that's what it should be. Not a kind of bright, smashy superhero comic. I don't think like the Hulk is, meant to be like like having a Planet Hulk or like having like space adventures or whatever. That's not the Hulk. The Hulk should be like this horror and kind of not just horror, but sort of a weird desperation for like, you get a tortured kind of version of Bruce Banner, who can die but can't die. Like he wants to die, but he can't. And the Hulk is basically immortal. Like here's the back cover. He gets a giant hole shot through him, and he's just heals back. Bruce Banner gets murdered a bunch of times, like 2 or 3 times in the 5 issues, and he still he just turns into the Hulk and comes back. So it's really nice, and the storytelling in this book is really interesting too. It's not every issue is not the same, but there is this. The 3rd issue has this thing where people are telling a story from different perspectives, and they're telling the same story, but they all have a different perspective. So you have this cop here, and his story is looks like kind of like a Silver Age comic. You'll see and then you have this other guy who's just some douchebag bar owner or something, and he's telling this story about his contact with the Hulk, and it's kind of like this kind of art, this ew art. And then there's this old woman at a church who is telling the story of her interaction with the Hulk, and it's dressed it's kind of drawn like this poppy romance comic, and and then you have the priest who at the church who's telling the same story, and his is it's this kind of dark, the backgrounds are all black kind of horror comic. So you get this weird juxtaposition. So you can see here's a page of the juxtaposition where they're talking about the same scene here, but the priest sees it as a monster, and the woman sees it as this kind of he's a monster picking on this romantic hero down here. It's a really interesting kind of story. It's a really nice way to look at things, because you have the police story here is it's like an old school comic. It's got the Zipatone over it and stuff. It's really nice. But the actual story, you have to kind of put it together yourself. It's really interesting. And you get an appearance from the Wendigo of Alpha Flight formerly. But, you know, the Hulk and Wendigo have like a whole history of fighting each other. But it's all of the stories in this were good. They were really memorable. Not memorable, but easy to read, fun to read, and effective. So they all kind of work as a horror comic. It's really nice. It's really good. And I hope they keep this up as a horror comic instead of a kind of superhero comic. It works. It really works as a horror comic. And I can't wait to get them more of these. I don't know how many are out for in trades. I think the second trade is up, but not the third. But this is Immortal Hulk 1 through 5. Really good. And I can't wait to get into more of it. Next, we've got some older stuff that... stuff I love that I just read again. But this is the first volume of the complete 8-Ball. Now, this comes in a slipcase with 2 books. I'm done with the first one. I haven't finished the second one yet, so I'm not going to talk about it. But, like, this is... The first book here is the first 10 issues, issues 1 through 10 of 8-Ball. And if you don't know what 8-Ball is 8-Ball is Daniel Klaus, who did... I mean, his most famous thing is probably Ghost World, that movie with, what's her face, Christina Ricci. But 8-Ball, it was kind of the, like, it's an adult comic, and by adult I mean it's like adult-centered, not like it's porno. But, so the idea here is that 8-Ball starts out like a freight train. It just blows you away from the first page. And let me tell you, it starts out serializing this story, Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron. One of my favorite comic stories ever. I remember seeing when I was a kid collecting comics, when 8-Ball was out on the stands, I remember seeing it at the comic store, but not being able to buy it because it was kept behind the register in like a section that it was like the 18 plus section. So like when I was like, whatever, 13 or whatever in 1990, I couldn't buy it. It wasn't allowed for me to, I wasn't allowed to buy these 8-Ball comics, but I always saw them and I always wanted to read them. And once I got like a little bit older, I found a trade paperback of Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron. And I recognized it as like, hey, that thing from 8-Ball. So I bought it and fell in love with that story. It's such a weird kind of trip through this kind of story, but that is just a part of 8-Ball. So it's like 10 parts of Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron are in 10 issues of 8-Ball. So this is like, covers all of that in this book. But each issue it's an anthology. So each issue has like, 3 or 4 page, well, like 1 to 4 page usually stories. Sometimes 8 pages for some longer stuff, but like, you've got like this kind of Jack Chick tract kind of parody called Devil Doll. Kind of a nice little thing, kind of a goofy parody. And it's, it's like 3 pages. And then you have like this kind of The Laughin' Spittin' Man. It's kind of like a horror story, a goofy horror story. But, you've got also like the Adventures of Dan Pussy in here, who is like, it's kind of like there you go, young Dan Pussy. He is like, he's a comic artist, and it's kind of like a parody of the comic system, like, and the history of comics. So it's interesting to read if you're interested in comics, I guess. But, like I said, 8-Ball is great. It's full of a bunch of stuff like that. But, those are the main standouts. So, like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron and Young Dan Pussy are like things that everybody knows. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's like, I guess Art School Confidential is in here too, but it's like, 2 pages. It's not, it's not that much. But that became a movie also. And then there's just like a lot of random stuff by, Dan Klaus doing weird stuff. But 8-Ball is kind of the thing that, if you're really into comics and you want to experience something that's totally great. I mean, I'm sure most people have read 8-Ball, but if you haven't, at least at least get Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron, because that is like hauntingly good. But yeah, I've got the second volume of this. You can see it says 8-ball here on the side of the book, but that's half because the second book is in a slipcase. But yeah, this is of course always really good to read. It always gets me excited about reading more stuff. So last thing here, in the same kind of vein, different artist, but this is Charles Burns' Black Hole. Black Hole, kind of a horror story, kind of like a weird urban horror story. And I say that it's like, it takes place in the mid-70s, and it's essentially like a kind of like a sexually transmitted horror disease. And I say that in like, it's some kind of sexually transmitted disease that will mutate people into weird things. So like you get the disease, and okay, so like here, I'll show you a good example of this, because like in the inner cover of the book, so okay, here's the outside of the book anyway, but like here's the inner cover. It's like these, here you can see, here are these like kids in the story that are, these are the high school kids who are kind of the characters in the story. And you know, in the back, here's them after like they get the disease, and like, you know, they have all these like weird kind of, you know, mutations is what it is. They become like these weird monsters, essentially. So, you know, some of them are like passable monsters, though. So you'll get like, so like one of the main characters is this girl, and she gets the disease from this guy who she falls in love with, and his mutation is like he has an extra mouth on his neck, like down here on his neck, so he's constantly covered, so he just looks normal. And the other main character gets it from this other girl who's her mutation is like she has this like a tail, so it's kind of hideable, right? But he gets like these weird like things all over his like the side of his chest that he can just kind of wrap up and look normal. So it's really interesting. But some people are less lucky. They get all these weird facial mutations, and they become like hideous mutant freaks of some kind. So like they all live like out in the woods in like a weird hobo camp full of mutated kids. It's kind of it's like a really interesting story, kind of like the intersection of all these kids moving together. The art is like this kind of, oh, I don't want to show that one. It was like, just open a random page and show some art, but actually it was like a page with all nudity. But let me find a page that's really nice looking, but isn't also filled with nudity. Oh, probably like right in the beginning, there's some really good ones. But, oh, well, here's a good thing. There's like, these guys find the camp by accident. They're just kind of going through their stuff, right? But, you know, like here there's like one of the people that's like horribly mutated from the camp, and they've kind of run off. But, oh, here's the thing where like this girl's mutation is like she sheds her skin, so like she starts pulling her face off. I mean, it's just more skin underneath, but like it's kind of grotesque, right? It's a really interesting, I don't know, it's a really interesting story. It's weird, it's strange. It doesn't have like a incredibly satisfying conclusion, but like it still ends in a way that like you can, you know, it's final, I guess, but like it's not like super satisfying, but it doesn't, you know, like stories don't have to end in a satisfying way usually. It's the kind of thing where, you know, looking at this, you get this weird kind of, I don't know, this story has like an overarching feeling of melancholy is what I want to say. But like, it's so weird and strange and really interesting to read. So, you know, it's like 300 something pages. It took me like a really short time to read it. There's not a lot of text. There's a lot of pictures, but not a lot of dialogue. So overall, That all is like this week. Well, this video, all of these books are definitely a must read. So I would say get on these. Like every single one of these is something you should probably read. At least I'd recommend them. I mean, Black Hole is kind of a legendary one. I really need to get more Charles Burns stuff, but it's kind of like hard to find in Japan. It's not easy. The one I want most is Skin Deep because it contains the Dog Boy story, which I didn't know was a comic. But excited for that because I really like Dog Boy. It was like on Liquid Television in the 90s. Apparently based on a comic by Charles Burns, so it's bound to be. I don't know how close it is to the show or whatever, but probably good. So interested in reading that. But yeah, that's it for this time. I'll probably be back next week unless I get busy. But yeah, I will catch you guys next time.